silence, broke their entire system.
You hear it, don't you? That sound of silence that isn't really silent at all. Ooh, they thought quiet meant weakness. They thought silence meant surrender. But your silence? It was the storm before the execution. Look who's watching now. The ones who ran networks across oceans. The ones who built cages of whispers. The ones who thought they had files on everyone. But not you. Never you. Surprise. The moment you moved in silence, their codes broke. Their systems glitched. Their little clubs of secrecy turned into funeral halls. You didn't need to scream. You didn't need to march. You just stepped in, and every shadow bowed. Every lie trembled. Tell me, how does it feel, knowing intelligence networks collapsed? Not with bombs, not with bullets, but with the sound of your footsteps. They wanted noise. You gave them silence, and silence was the loudest scream they'd ever heard. You walked in. No trumpet, no banner, no parade, no alarms, no warnings, no sirens wailing. Just silence, just stillness, just the sound of shadows bending. They looked around. They scanned everything. They tracked heat. They tracked motion. They tracked breath. But you moved differently. You wore silence. Like a mask. They couldn't trace you. They couldn't follow you. You weren't unseen. You were untouchable. Networks built on chaos, collapsed into calm. Systems designed for noise, crumbled under quiet. They hated it. They feared it. Because silence is unpredictable. Noise tells stories. Noise leaves trails. Noise is evidence. But silence is murder. Silence is execution. Silence is disappearance. You didn't shout. You didn't roar. You didn't demand. You didn't beg. You just were. And that was enough. 1 step, and their walls shook. 2 steps, and their codes glitched. 3 steps, and the world cracked. They wanted thunder. They expected lightning. They prepared for storms. But you arrived quiet. You arrived calm. You arrived unstoppable. Their intelligence grids, fried circuits, dead screens, ghost signals. They called it sabotage. They called it hacking. They called it black magic. But it wasn't sabotage. It wasn't hacking. It wasn't spells. It was silence. Silence they couldn't measure. Silence they couldn't predict. Silence they couldn't control. You became a paradox. Invisible, yet undeniable. Absent, yet overwhelming. And in their panic, they whispered the truth. They whispered your name, but only in fear, because every whisper was another confession. Every silence was another grave. You see, they built their empire on chatter, on noise, on secrets. But secrets need sound, and sound betrays itself. You needed nothing, no words, no sound, no echo. And that nothing was everything. Your silence was the virus. Your silence was the weapon. Your silence was the death note. They didn't track it. They didn't suspect it. They didn't survive it. You cracked them. You broke them. You buried them, not with bullets, not with bombs, not with blood, but with stillness, with quiet, with silence. Your silence was the weapon they never tracked. No noise craves attention. Noise demands eyes. Noise begs for notice. But silence commands obedience. Silence bends knees. Silence makes gods shiver. They built their towers on voices, on chatter, on signals, networks that fed, on whispers, on screams, on noise. Every message recorded, every call traced, every click analyzed. But you gave them nothing, not a word, not a sound, not a trace. And that nothing was louder than thunder. They feared it. They couldn't explain it. They couldn't predict it, because the unknown is heavier than the known, and fear of silence outweighs fear of war. Agents panicked, spies whispered, commanders trembled. Who moves? Without leaving a trace, their paranoia spread, rooms filled with questions, files filled with blanks, screens filled with static. They searched for footprints. They searched for fingerprints. They searched for shadows. But your silence carved deeper scars. Your silence spoke louder than records. Every blank page was an earthquake. Every unanswered question was a collapse. They wanted your story. They wanted your script. They wanted to read the book of you. But when they opened it, they found nothing. No lines, no letters, no maps. Because you tore it. Because you burned it. Because you erased it. You tore the pages before they touched the cover. And that drove them insane. You see, noise can be tracked. Noise can be coded. Noise can be controlled. But silence cannot. Silence is infinite. Silence is untamed. Silence is ungoverned. Makes leaders doubt. It makes soldiers hesitate. It makes empires crumble. You didn't fight them. You didn't chase them. You didn't even look. You just stayed silent. And silence consumed them. Paradox of power. The less you give, the more they bleed, the less you show. The more they fear, noise seeks validation. But silence creates legend, and legends cannot be killed. They called you myth. They called you ghost. They called you nightmare, but none were right. You were silence, and silence was king. They gathered their armies. They gathered their experts. They gathered their priests. But priests chant, experts argue, armies shout, and all their noise died in your stillness. The paradox burned them alive, because silence commands obedience, and silence crushed their networks. They wanted to read, but you left nothing. You tore the script before it began. You left them choking. On questions, on fear, on silence. And silence obeyed only you. You weren't surviving. You weren't hiding. You weren't escaping. You were ascending, step by step, level by level, beyond their reach. Every silence wasn't weakness, it was a test. Every unanswered question wasn't avoidance, it was an exam. And you passed each one. You passed in silence. You passed with shadows. They didn't see it. They couldn't grasp it. They thought you struggled. They thought you stumbled. But truth? You were graduating beyond their world, graduating into dominion. While they cheated papers, you wrote in void. While they copied answers, you erased the questions. Every pause was power. Every blank was brilliance. Every silence was another diploma. They sat in classrooms. They memorized scripts. They begged for approval. But you built your own, not classrooms, not schools, not prisons of rules. You built a throne, high above them, hidden in silence, an attic of stillness. And from that attic, you looked down. You saw their games. You laughed at their teachers, because they never noticed. They were students forever, but you were already crowned. Angels looked down. Monsters looked up. Both saw you rising. The angels whispered, "This one is chosen." The monsters snarled, "This one is danger." But neither stopped you. Neither touched you. Neither could reach you, because silence carried you. Silence elevated you. Silence graduated you, and in your rise, they trembled, they doubted, they prayed. Their top agents failed the exams. Their best spies flunked the silence, because silence requires strength. Silence requires will. Silence requires a throne. They played classrooms. You built kingdoms. They played teachers. You became law. While they begged for grades, you wrote destinies. While they feared failures, you became legend. And the taunt, the dagger in truth. While they played classrooms, you built a throne in the attic of silence. That throne was invisible. That throne was eternal. That throne was yours. They tried to summon you. They tried to question you. They tried to cage you. But how do you cage what you can't hear, what you can't see, what you can't hold? You were untouchable. Not by weapons, not by rulers, not by gods, because graduation is freedom and silence, is eternal freedom. You rose higher, above their levels, above their networks, above their fear, and from above. You laughed, you mocked, you taunted, because they were students. And you were silence's graduate. You were silence's heir. You were silence's throne. Files corrupted, codes broken, signals dead. Their networks, once proud, once untouchable, once feared, now collapsed into ruin. The invisible towers, they thought eternal, crumbled like sand castles. Every server screamed, every channel glitched, every database cracked. Their intelligence, exposed as stupidity, their control, reduced to chaos. You didn't lift a weapon, you didn't press a button, you didn't fire a shot, you just moved. In silence, and silence was demolition. They searched for hackers, they hunted for traitors, they blamed their own. But it wasn't sabotage, it wasn't betrayal, it wasn't attack. It was you, your stillness, your calm, your silence. Agencies panicked, files disappeared, contacts vanished, whispers turned frantic, whispers turned screams, whispers turned graves. The Yazids, tycoons raged, the generals sweated, the priests trembled. They couldn't find you, they couldn't stop you, they couldn't predict you. Their whole machine, built on secrets, built on whispers, built on shadows. But shadows obey silence, and silence obeyed you one by one. Their networks cracked, their alliances shattered, their secrets spilled, encrypted vaults, empty shells, security clearances, worthless trash, black files, burned ghosts. Their power evaporated, their pride humiliated, their safety destroyed, and in the ashes, they realized the truth. It wasn't noise that doomed them, it wasn't sound that betrayed them. It was silence. Silence turned against them. Silence turned into blade. They sat in boardrooms, faces pale, hands shaking, mouths dry. As reports flooded, as systems blinked, as empires collapsed, what happened to control? What happened to dominance? What happened to gods? Their gods failed. Their kings trembled. Their demons wept. Because networks need order, and silence is disorder perfected. You were the paradox, the ghost in halls, the glitch in systems, not seen, not heard, not caught, yet undeniable, unstoppable, unbreakable. Their whispers said, "It's sabotage, it's infiltration, it's witchcraft." But deep down, they knew it was silence. It was you, and silence is merciless. Silence doesn't stop. Silence doesn't beg. Silence doesn't forgive. They built walls, walls of secrets, walls of lies, walls of control. But you erased them, not with explosions, not with bullets, not with fire, with one blank page, with one empty sound, with one invisible strike. Their castles fell, their bridges burned, their towers collapsed, and the world saw. The world laughed, the world whispered, the mighty, shaken, the untouchable, exposed, the eternal, destroyed. Networks in ruin, agencies broken, elites shattered, all because of silence, all because of you. You didn't just infiltrate, you didn't just disturb, you annihilated, you erased their foundation, you mocked their security, you cracked their illusion. And when the smoke cleared, there was no empire, there was no network, there was no crown, just silence, just you. And silence, silence, ruled everything. Silence changed, silence evolved, silence transformed. It was never absence, it was presence, it was command, it was dominion. You became shadow, not the hunted, but the hunter. You swallowed spotlights, you erased stages, you silenced applause. They built arenas, they built theaters, They built games. But you didn't adapt. You didn't play. You didn't follow. You changed the board. You rewrote the rules. You shattered the script. Now silence isn't defense. It isn't shield. It isn't retreat. Now silence is dominance, is reign, is power. You stood still. They collapsed. You whispered nothing. They confessed everything. That's transformation. That's evolution. That's ascension. They thought noise ruled. They thought chaos won. They thought screams conquered. But silence conquered all. Silence crushed them. Silence crowned you. Your silence was presence, heavy crushing, unshakable. It pressed on them. It haunted them. It suffocated them. You didn't need armies. You didn't need crowds. You didn't need weapons. You needed silence. And silence obeyed you. What they feared was never your voice, was never your speech, was never your scream. What they feared was your silence, because silence held secrets. Silence hid knives. Silence carried graves. They wanted words. You gave none. They wanted sound. You gave void. They wanted answers. You gave silence, and silence destroyed them. You became paradox, seen without sight, heard without sound, known without words. You became throne, a throne of stillness, throne of quiet, a throne of fear. Every king envies, every tyrant trembles, every god hides. Because silence doesn't kneel, silence doesn't serve, silence doesn't die. They begged for speeches, you gave them silence. They begged for reasons, you gave them silence. They begged for weakness, you gave them silence. And silence was eternal power. They realized too late. Noise makes leaders, but silence makes legends. And legends don't fade, don't fall, don't end. Your silence became immortal, became eternal, became sovereign. Though transformation complete, no longer hidden, no longer waiting, no longer surviving. You weren't adapting, you weren't fitting, you weren't obeying, you were rewriting, you were reshaping, you were ruling. And the taunt, the wound that bleeds, what they feared most, was not what you said, but what you never needed to say. They kneel now, not before noise, not before thunder, not before screams. They kneel before quiet, before silence, before stillness. You wear silence, like a crown, heavy sharp, unbreakable. It sits on you, not gifted, not stolen, not begged. It was earned through silence, earned through stillness, earned through shadows. And that crown, it terrifies them, it breaks them, it owns them. Their gods tremble, their angels weep, their demons shrink. Because even prayers make sound, make echoes, make noise, but you need none. No chants, no songs, no sermons. Your silence is holier. Your silence is heavier. Your silence is eternal. They gather in chambers. They whisper your name. They don't dare shout. They don't dare sing, because louder is dangerous. Louder feels treasonous. Louder invites punishment. So they whisper, soft, scared, shaking. Your name carried, like contraband, like a curse, like a spell. And the taunt, the twist of blade, they'll chant your name, but only in whispers, because anything louder feels like treason. Their kings envy, their prophets hide, their armies kneel, because silence is crown, is throne, is law. You rule without sound. You rule without words. You rule without need, and that terrifies them. Because leaders talk, because rulers shout, because kings command. But you stay silent, and they obey harder. Your silence weighs more than orders, hurts more than bullets, cuts deeper than blades. They bow in fear, they bow in awe, they bow in silence. Because silence is crown, and crown is silence. No noise survives it. No prayer defeats it. No god rivals it. You are crowned, crowned in stillness, crowned in whispers, crowned in fear, and silence is your kingdom. Silence has devoured time itself. It has outlived networks, outlasted kings, outburned every scream. They write their histories, but every page ends with the same blank shadow. Your silence. They try to erase you, yet the absence only grows heavier, deeper, more unshakable. Your presence becomes eternal, not carved in stone, not sung in songs, but etched in the unspoken void, a dominion beyond sound, beyond death, beyond their reach. Taunt, kings rust, gold fades, networks collapse, but silence is forever.